week for you, and we'll get to Kevin Brown too. Obviously, I want to get your take on that front. We just talked about it, but I would like to start with all of the headlines that you made, including the conversation with Keenan Middleton. He made the headlines. You did the reporting. So great to have you on, Jesse. And can you run us through your thoughts on the White Sox this week?
Yeah, first of all, big fan of all you guys. AJ and I go way, way back, and he hasn't taken my head off yet. So glad to be with you guys.
Mr. Cub himself here, Jesse Rogers. Mr. Cub himself.
Stop.
Here we go. Anyway, so look, Keenan said what he had to say, and people wonder why did he say it, and I just think he needed to get it off his chest. And I've heard from a bunch of former players since Sunday, since the story posted, and they're like, look, sunlight's the best disinfectant. This needed to get out there. And, this is something that's been brewing for a couple of years. Even Rick Hahn admitted that the other day. So, if not now, when, right? The team bottomed out on the field. It's had its problems off the field. They've blown up this rebuild that didn't work. And I think people needed to hear this. And I think that was Middleton's motivation. It's not like the team did him wrong or anything. I just felt like he had to get it off his chest. And like I said, I've heard from a lot of players. You heard Lance Lynn on the record kind of, with you guys acknowledge it all. And so, it needed to be said, and this was the time to do it.
But why Middleton? Why Keenan Middleton? Why was it him? Why wasn't it, I mean, I love Lance Lynn. Why wasn't it Lance Lynn? Why wasn't it Giolito? If this has been brewing for years, why hasn't it been fixed yet? And then also, when you saw Rick Hahn talk, what was he talking about with Middleton having problems in the clubhouse? If Middleton's the one given the comments that everyone says needed to be said, what is Rick Hahn doing by saying, well, he also apologized for things he did in the clubhouse? Well, what the heck did he do in the clubhouse? He looks like he got traded and then called everyone out.
Yeah, I don't know what he did in the clubhouse. It sounded like a one-off incident. I don't know what Rick's trying to spin here because they admitted to dysfunction. They admitted to a bad culture. So all Middleton did was provide some details and some context. I truly feel like, AJ, and you might know better than I do, there are people in that organization, just like the former players, that are not upset this thing went public. I think they like the idea of sunlight being the disinfectant. And now that it's public, what do you do to change it? How do you address this thing? So I just feel like, why Middleton? I don't know. Because he's an outspoken guy. And who wants that kind of heat? Most players don't want it. I give Middleton credit. He didn't back down. I mean, they traveled to Chicago after he said those things. It's amazing. He's in town here where I'm based. And he had to, face the music, so to speak. And he stood by those comments. So I just feel like Lance Lynn, Joe Kelly, these guys probably don't want the heat. But I'm not going to name names to the guys that, told me privately that they were glad this happened. But you can guess who they are. It's a lot of former players over the last couple of years that are like, this was dysfunctional, and it predated Pedro Grifol, and apparently Grifol didn't help matters.
So I'm not in the White Sox organization like AJ is, but I've heard so much about it. I've talked to players that have played there. I've talked to even coaches that have coached there. Is there anybody in the front office that would step up like Keenan and say, look, this is dysfunctional from the top of our front office down, not just players? Like the players get the trickle down effect of this.
Right.
Or nobody will say that because nobody ever wants to get fired by Jerry, and that's really the only way you ever get fired.
You're exactly right. I mean, I thought the most telling comment from Middleton was towards the end of the article when he said, I don't know, can we curse on this show?
Please fucking curse.
The shit rolls downhill. That, I thought that was really telling. And that's why I can't point everything at Pedro Grifol. He admits it predated him. Kenny and Jerry at the top, Kenny Williams, Jerry Reinsdorf, really have to think about things in a larger sense here. This isn't one player. This isn't one person. This isn't one manager. So, shit rolls downhill, I thought was the most telling comment because it makes it a bigger thing than just a malcontent here or there, which they have a few. But what you allow to happen at the top is going to trickle down to the players, as you said. So it is a bigger picture organizational thing they have to address.
Has Pedro Grifol done anything right other than keep his job in the sense of like he hasn't said anything wrong?
Yeah, I mean, you heard his comments the other day. He's almost admitted to screwing up this thing from the beginning, and players have told me that he did not lay down the law in spring training, and that those guys that left for the WBC sort of impacted that whole idea of culture building. I feel like Pedro's talked a good game, but he hasn't done the things necessary to set the tone. And talking a game to the media is meaningless if you're not doing the right thing inside the locker room.
Jesse, I'm going to play just a minor devil's advocate here. We're talking about adults. Like, there is a line, but I do remember, for example, a couple weeks ago, Tyler Glasnow was on with us, and he's like, Pirates, way too military-ish. They had so many damn rules and things. He couldn't take it. He goes to Tampa Bay. He's like, they let us do almost whatever we want. And obviously, they're disciplined. They have work ethic. It's for individuals to thrive and then thrive together as a team that they've gotten better in the new place that they're at. I'm trying to pinpoint maybe contract extensions. I love if I'm an owner and I see a good player, like the Orioles should have locked up Adley Rutschman last year and Gunnar Henderson and guys like that, right? And we've seen that work in other organizations. Was there mistakes made maybe with not giving extensions to the right players and then going in cruise control afterward, including not giving their best in terms of the time commitment to the team? You know, like I'm trying to say, okay, these are people that are in their 20s and 30s. Do we need Lance Lynn there in spring training and not at the WBC to say, don't do that? You're a professional ball player.
I think you're on to something. Okay, so this is my opinion, and I think this is a question that's going to go on in front offices more and more, especially with long-term deals being handed out. And the question is this: does this ultra-talented player love the game of baseball? Does he love to win as much as he hates to lose? Does he hate to lose as much as he loves to win? All these sort of, out in the atmosphere kind of questions that you can't measure with analytics need to be asked more and more. Did the White Sox have a Bryce Harper on this team? No. Do they have a Jose Ramirez on this team? Guys that will say, we are going in this direction and you are following me, or all hell's going to break loose in here. The answer is no. So to your question, they gave out extensions to guys that hadn't proven anything in baseball and hadn't proven that desire to be great, that desire to win, that desire to be there for their teammates. So the mistakes were made at that level. But again, there's this overall lack of due diligence that allowed those mistakes to happen. So it's bigger than just a personnel decision here or there. But yes, those individual players were the wrong guys to lead this team. And Pedro Grifol said as much the other day. He thought he had some leaders in there, and it was the wrong guys.
Okay, Jesse. Then listen, I'm about to, as Kratzy said, my ears are going to start, because obviously, me, I root for the White Sox like crazy, and I want them to be a really good organization from top to bottom. Let's start with this. 29 other teams didn't have a problem in team building in spring training. There's one, okay? Everyone, the Phillies had how many guys gone? The Cardinals, they're not having a great year. They're just having a bad year, but they had a ton of guys. But you don't hear them, their catcher stayed, Wilson Contreras, and they were like, oh, well, he sucked at the beginning of the year, right? So that's just an excuse for me. It's always an excuse. How did they not see this coming? You had A.J. Pollock. He had a $12 million player option or whatever it was. Yeah. And he's like, fuck that. I ain't going back there. I'll take my buyout for $1 million, and I'll go free agent and lose money to pick where I go next. I mean, if that doesn't open your eyes, I don't know what does, because I've talked to guys. I know guys in the league. I know guys that have played for this organization, and they come up to me and go, how the fuck did y'all win there? How did you guys win? And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, it was just normal for us. And maybe that was wrong on our part, but there are guys that come up to me and are like, I've never seen things like this happen in any other organization. These guys are guys that have been around, and they hear things and they're like, man, this is not what the big leagues was meant to be, or this and that. And there's just so many things, and I'm not going to get into it because, again, like, I want the White Sox to succeed, but man, like there's so many points where it's just like, what are they missing here? Who's missing it?
Leadership. Leadership, AJ, at every level. And it really does start at the top. I mean, leadership is something you know it when you see it, and you know when it's not there. But it's hard to define. But it's leadership. It's leadership from the top down. And look, I've known Jerry Reinsdorf as long as you have, and I just don't think he's as hands-on as he used to be. He's a lot older now. And so if there's no accountability starting at the top, how do you expect to get it in the locker room? And that's the answer. It's a fragile situation there. So anything that takes away from that culture could allow it to explode. So yeah, guys leave for the WBC. They hire a first-year manager who came from a losing organization, which, by the way, I like Pedro Grifol back in December, January when they hired him. But the facts are the facts. So you have these fragile things going on. The position player leadership, very fragile. Tim Anderson's whole situation, very fragile. So when you get off to a bad start, which Rick documented the other day talking to the media, all of a sudden you have nothing to fall back on. Yeah, and the bottom line is you learn more about individuals through adversity than you do success. That's why 21, okay, fine, terrible division. They win by 13 games. But as soon as adversity hit, they had no leadership to fall back on. That's the best way I can describe it.
Okay, Jesse, they canceled Sox Fest this year. Why? Isn't that a point where you talk about disinfectant? The fans were coming. They were ready to ask the questions of free agency and trades and payroll and all these questions. And when the White Sox canceled, which I think they're the only team that did it. I may be wrong in that, but the reason was they didn't really have a reason. They're just like, we're not doing it this year.
Yeah.
Then you have the fight that happened a couple days ago, right?
Yeah.
Tim Anderson hasn't said a word. And I said on this show, you got to say something. Don't just let us try to figure out what happened. Give your side. And you were there, I think, in 2006 when Michael Barrett and I happened.
Yeah,
I was there. I was there, right? You guys asked me the questions. I gave you my answers. It's the best way to handle these things, I think.
It goes back to this word accountability, right? Accountability comes with consequences. The consequence of getting into a fight like that is having to explain yourself along with the suspension. Like, this is professional sports. You get paid a lot of money. Fans pay a lot of money to watch you play. They pay a lot of money for cable to watch you play. Like, they deserve an explanation sometimes. Most people, most organizations understand that. So I'm with you, AJ. It just doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. The other day, Pedro Grifol was suspended. Charlie Montoya managed. I wasn't there, but Mike Tozar, the field coordinator, came out and spoke after the game instead of Charlie Montoya, a former manager. So there's just something weird in terms of accountability and leadership going on there that now is getting exposed in a very public manner, in part thanks to Keenan Middleton, but also because of how bad they were on the field. Like, something has to give. Someone needs to explain this, and it just really doesn't happen when it's supposed to. But finally, maybe it's happening because of what Middleton said publicly.
Is Dallas Keuchel or Tony La Russa owed a large apology, public apology? Because they were crucified for Dallas for what he said and Tony for whatever it was that they felt like was his fault.
Let me tell you something. On ESPN radio in Chicago all last year, I was screaming, this isn't all on Tony. Yes, he made some glaring mistakes. This isn't all on Tony. Every manager makes glaring mistakes. I said it all last year. I got to tell you a quick story I told last year. I was at a charity golf outing. I stayed on one hole to meet all the participants. 36 groups came by last year. And I swear to God, this is on the south side of Chicago. Every single group wanted to talk about Tony La Russa and only Tony La Russa. Every single one. And now fast forward to this year, it wasn't all on Tony La Russa. Now, I think Tony made some mistakes. I think he bent over backwards a little bit too much to connect with today's player. So, okay, he made mistakes. Like I said, every manager makes mistakes. But you're exactly right. People like Keuchel, people like La Russa are owed an apology despite their struggles. Keuchel struggled on the mound. But those are two different things. You can make mistakes and struggle, but you can also be right about the culture. And, I do think they also missed Jose Abreu. Here's what I say. Jose Abreu and Tony La Russa were enough to keep an 81-81 team together. That's the best they could do with the culture problems. You remove them from the equation. Now there's no respect in that locker room, and you see what happens.
Jesse, are you going to be at the golf outing on Monday?
I'm not sure that I'm invited.
I'm invited. I'm invited.
Well,
how are you not invited?
You have a little bit more stature. I am going over there today. They're playing the Yankees. I'm going to go over there for the first time since Middleton's comments. I'm going to probably go say hi to Keenan and just check in with him because I'm sure he's had a rough couple days. But hopefully this is a good thing for the White Sox, AJ. You just said you're a fan. This is the thing that has to be exposed for change to happen. Otherwise, it just percolates under the surface and it continues there. So I think this is a good thing. And I guarantee you there are people within that White Sox organization that are happy that Keenan said these things, even if they won't admit it publicly. And I can tell you there's at least a half dozen former players that are thrilled that it happened.
Jesse, what changes? Because I think you know and I know I'm going to be at the game on Sunday, and then I'm going to be in the golf outing on Monday this week. So I don't know if you're going to be there on Sunday, but I'd love to hear more about this privately. What changes? Will anything – because I think if you go on Twitter, and I'm obviously on Twitter, and I think I saw Rick Hahn call White Sox Twitter a cesspool of ideas and things on the other day in his press conference. I found kind of fun because that's kind of what it's meant for, is people to give their opinions, right? Whether good or bad. They do it about me. They do it about you. They do it about everybody. That's just the way that works. If you're on there and you see it, guess what? Most of it's not going to be probably good because that's what people do. It's fine. You have to be able to handle that. But what can change? What changes? Will Jerry make the changes that people are calling for? Because everyone's saying, is Pedro one and done? Do they get rid of Rick? Do they get rid of Kenny? Do they get rid of whoever? But will anything happen? Because this, as you've mentioned, isn't a 1 year, one-hit wonder. This apparently has been going on, and you're there way more than I am, so you see it. But will anything change?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, and I am not going to make a prediction because this organization does operate a little different, right? I mean, we're talking about it now. Jerry refused comment to some reporters the other day. If the owner isn't going to talk after what went on the field, and then a former player calling out the organization off the field, if he's not going to speak to the media or the fans then how do I know what's going to happen? I would assume the sunlight being the disinfectant will have some impact. How big of an impact? I don't know. I would assume there's some changeover. Rick Hahn has talked cryptically about his situation. Who knows what could happen there? But you can't go business as usual, guys, right? Let's work backwards from that. There's no way it's business as usual. Something has to change. The question is, will it be large enough? Will it be more dramatic enough to impact what goes on the field? I hope so. Like you, I'm a Chicagoan. It's a better story for us in the media when they're good. I don't enjoy these kinds of stories, to be honest.
Yes, you do. You're a Cubs fan. You're a Cubs fan, Jesse. Don't lie to the people.
Next time, I'm gonna tell the story of when you called me out because my daughter was wearing a Cubs jersey at 2 years old.
Well, okay.
So you're a true fan. You're a true fan.
Next time we're going to talk about playoff contenders because I didn't even have time to ask you about Kevin Brown, but we've covered it a ton. So and we've got to jump, but we hogged up all the time. I think this was worth it to talk White Sox.